Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining the Dreamers Lab podcast of Metaverse Summit. Today, we have the honor of welcoming an amazing speaker in AI, XR, and healthcare. So, welcome, Andrew. How are you?
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here on the Dreamers Lab. Nice to see you, Yingzi.
Amazing. Yeah, so Andrew is currently at the AWE in Europe in Vienna. She's going to share some insights around her expertise. Potentially, before jumping into more specifics, can you share with the audience of who you are, where you come from, how you became an expert in these specific topics?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long road, about 30 years or so. So I started my career knowing that I loved tech. I was a programmer to an extent, but I knew that I wasn't really a geek. I knew I was more of a designer, more of a creator. I went to uni and studied computational linguistics. And what my dream was back then was to do natural language processing and to design experiences where we use the natural voice. But at that time, the field was just in its infancy, and the jobs just weren't there. It really wasn't happening yet, and it's so exciting for me now because finally it's caught up. The industry with AI and what we can do with the LLMs, it's really what I dreamed of back when I was only a teenager. So that is really exciting to me. I've been interested in that my whole career. But what happened at the time is I went into design, went in kind of via publishing, because I've always loved the written word as well. And so I was a graphic designer, and then the internet happened. And I couldn't get in. I was thinking, gosh, should I try and work on CD-ROMs and, multimedia? It was kind of the thing at the time. But my boyfriend at the time was a physicist, and he was doing the internet at uni. So I thought, I'll go back to uni and I'll get in that way. And so I did a master's in bioinformatics. And then from there, some of my teachers set up a startup. And so I got an early kind of view of what it was like to I don't know, work in a startup. And my head got really big because I started winning pitches, big pitches with design agencies. And I was wheeled out as a technical person. And I kind of feel like I invented the discipline of UX because I, started doing sketches for other designers in design firms about how to design for the internet. And so because I got so much confidence early on, I started up my own agency. So I had about a decade there just on the wave of the internet. And we built all sorts of stuff. People will remember technologies like Flash. We built content management systems. We did a lot of software development. I got very, very technical during that period. But, VR hadn't really, it was there. It was in the kind of studies, but it wasn't, exciting enough to me yet. So I did that for 10 years. And then I realized that actually what I liked best was the UX side of things. And so I went back into big agencies and became a UX person primarily. And then I got into healthcare. And that for me was like coming home, because when I had been doing my bioinformatics, we were working on protein modeling and all that kind of thing. And so I was really excited to come back home. And that's where I started at Digitas Health, and where I am now again. So I had a little detour away from Digitas Health. And it's been very exciting working in healthcare, building all sorts of applications from, one of the things we're working on now is a sensor for tracking the murmurs in dogs, for veterinarians. But also XR has become hugely interesting. And so I'm going to talk a little bit in my talk tomorrow about the kinds of things we do at Publicis. That's our umbrella company over at Digitas Health, but also about a personal project of mine that I've been doing a lot of research. I'm going to present the research. And what I'm really interested in, very much in the space of accessibility, is in what's going to happen to the older people. There's so much focus now on youngsters and the digital natives, the virtual natives, all of that. But, at the same time, we're seeing our parents are losing the ability to participate in what the rest of us are doing. And that really, really touched me when I saw my parents go through that. And so that's become a real area of focus to me, is trying to make sure that what we're doing in VR, XR, AR, all of it, spatial computing, metaverse, whatever you call it, is inclusive. And for those who are not so able and on the accessibility front, that they can still participate.
Very interesting. So you are expert at the same time in UX design, but also in
Mm.
technology and specifically healthcare. I must admit that I'm not 100% expert on healthcare at all, actually.
Mhm.
So can you maybe do kind of like a overview of what
Yes.
kind of technologies are used, what kind of UX points, and what
Yeah.
involves in digital healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot there. So, on one hand, I'm going to tell you about a project that we're doing with the healthcare system in the UK, and they're called the NHS. And so, what the problem is that they're trying to solve is frailty. And so, again, this is about older people. But they, as people get older, they tend to feel like, oh, I'm just going to have tea and toast. That's enough for me. I'm not that hungry. And so what happens is that there's a bit of a decline in nutrition, and people get more frail, and then they have falls. And falls are a huge problem for the healthcare system. So often in healthcare, that what it's about is kind of trying to prevent things that may happen that will cause an increased cost to not only the quality of life of the person themselves, but also to the healthcare system. Because you can imagine if someone falls, and then there's a whole bunch of support systems that need to come in to help those people, particularly if they're on their own. So anyway, so what we've been working on is a new service. So we bring in principles of service design to help these people maintain their nutrition levels. It's got exercise, it takes a holistic view. And so we use technology to help them. So in this case, it's an app. And so the old person will actually, there's also an in-person component to this as well. So that when they're not with the support people in the healthcare system, they're at home, but they're doing things themselves. They're getting reminders, etc., about their nutrition to maintain that strength. There's grip strength as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in healthcare around that, working with the healthcare system. I mentioned products. So we do products like the sensor with the app, for the doctors with the dogs. And also I've done things like sleep apps. So a lot of this is still in the space of tracking and improving outcomes. Now on the XR space, what we're doing a lot of is more, we work with pharmaceutical companies. And in those cases, what we'll try and do, one project I worked on was a hypo simulator. This was when I was at Ogilvy. And this was something that would allow people to experience what it was like when your blood sugar goes so far down. And so it was a virtual experience that would allow you to feel some empathy and understanding for patients that are going through that. So these kinds of experiences are often educational. So we do quite a bit of that. Of course, there's a whole world around surgery, robotic surgery, and all that kind of thing we don't get involved in that side of things, but that is a very interesting space. Also, I think that the metaverse has opened some interesting doors, and we're starting to think about what kind of healthcare can be delivered through virtual means. With COVID, there was a huge push to start doing healthcare, telehealth, etc. And so using technologies that we're familiar with now, Zoom calls, etc. So with doctors, so people don't actually have to go to the doctor's office as often. And so now there's a bit of a tension between the thought of doing more with less, but then is the care adequate? And is that really the direction that we want to go in? There's a lot of these kind of big questions, big ethical questions around, should AI help care for us, that I think it's going to take some time before these things settle. People become less afraid of what the AI can bring to the table, and then we'll be able to really invest in them and see people taking the uptake will go up. In terms of AI beyond that, we do an awful lot as well around just customer experience. So in my role as the head of strategy at Digitas Health, there's omnichannel strategy as well comes into it, and we use AI to help to define the next best thing that will serve to our doctors. So that really gives them an experience. It's a bit more like an Amazon experience, if you will, than what traditionally pharmaceutical companies did in the past, was really send the same thing to everyone, as you can imagine. Now we're getting a lot better at that sort of thing.
Very interesting. So I totally agree when you were saying that we are taking for granted that our users are, young generation, plug
Yeah.
and play. They know how to navigate social media and metaverse and AI and XR. However, the aspects you mentioned that are serving our, gray economy or older
Yes.
generation is definitely a big chunk, and then
Mhm.
normally not that much mentioned in the media, let's say. Potentially, can you maybe share a little bit about your knowledge of the evolution of UX in
Mm.
those last 10 years, let's say, if not
Yeah.
going further away?
Yeah.
We see, of course, the XR hardware devices improved, but also, I guess people are more and more conscious about their health, right? Like,
Yeah.
we are mentioning like health 3.0
Yeah.
in doing more prevention instead of
Yeah.
doing more treatment. So can you maybe combine the different
Yes.
trunks in technology and in health consciousness to
Yeah.
share your insights?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put my UX hat on, just and geek out a little bit on this, because I love the ability to design user interfaces that are experiential, in the sense that you don't just have buttons that you press. There's not a navigation system. It's more intuitive in the way you would lead your life, you know. And what I'm seeing that's most exciting is examples from gaming, you know. It's I think it's just too early days for the rest of it, although we'll all be taking these kinds of hit tips to heart. But what you're seeing in gaming now is that it's always tricky in VR, because you're spinning around and you can't have a fixed menu in a way that feels intuitive. You've got a lot of things about panels that come up, panels in front. These are the common devices, but some of the ways that we're seeing in games are where you have a metaphorical backpack in your back. Those of you who are gamers know exactly what I'm talking about. So you pick things up and you put them in your backpack, or you might have a pouch. I've been playing a game, Dungeons of Eternity, that there's a pouch in front of you, and so you put things in the front of your pouch, you put things in the back, and so then the actions that you use when you're interacting with the experience itself are very natural, and it really creates a sense of heightened immersion. Which, it's funny how I'm part of a VR community as well, and people go to huge lengths just to have a little bit more immersion. It's almost like, I don't know, a drug. I think for me, and I think for some others, it's almost like a sci-fi kind of fantasy, where you feel like it's almost like you can't go to another planet. We can't have, true sci-fi, but this feels a little bit like sci-fi, because the worlds in VR are so heightened and so interesting. So this, in some ways, gives you a little taste of that kind of thing. So I'm just geeking out a little bit on the new ways to build navigation systems, and just to create an experience that just reinforces that sense of immersion, is really amazing. Now I'm going to try and rewind to the other thing you were talking about, prevention in healthcare. One of the things I think is really interesting is the integration with the home. And a woman that I spoke with at UX Strat last year works at Philips. I think she's just left Philips, actually. But she talked a lot about the kind of enablement of the tracking aspects in the home. And I think we're going to see more of that. I had a little idea the other day where you might have a portal on your wall that would then take you through to something else, but you would sort of have a sense of that portal being always there in part of your home. So I think it could be very interesting, where our homes become kind of both real and immersive at the same time. It's really going to be exciting in the future, I think.
We are entering into kind of already a futuristic scenario.
Isn't it?
So potentially, can you also explain to us what are the state of arts, meaning that there are specific need for a specific crowd of individuals, I guess, when they need a assistant, and
Yeah.
they will have some VR content. If not, we are pretty much living the same old way in our home, right?
Yeah.
So can you maybe give us a couple of examples of the state of art, and also if you could give us some futuristic scenario that are
Yeah.
either being developed or what you think will happen to all of us when
Yeah.
we are, normal, healthy individuals for prevention, or when we are needing some actual assistance.
Yeah, definitely. I've just come off the back of this research with these older people, and the thing that kind of struck me the most is that their perceptions about this new technology and this new, I don't know, opportunities in this futuristic world that we're kind of going into, they just don't see it at all. It really does not. It's just not in their sense of reality. And increasingly, as you get older, you tend to become more pragmatic, and so it's going to be very, very interesting to see how the uptake of things, how we will get there. And I think what we're going to have to do is really figure out what the vision of the future is, and to make it a positive vision, because there is so much fear around AI at the moment. There's so much fear about the privacy of data. I think it's very easy for people to think, oh, well, yeah, I could have a scanner in my house that will track me every day, and then I could head off all kinds of diseases. But then immediately after that thought, it's okay, but what about that data? Is it going to be safe? And how is that going to be used against me? Because, anyone who's had any sorts of investigations about diseases that are, concerning, immediately becomes, knows that when they're talking to their insurance company, and I'm in the UK, I'm not talking about America, it's everywhere. Suddenly there are issues like, okay, am I, insurable? And so this data is not only, not only does it have the power to prevent a lot of diseases, it also has the power to enslave us in a way. And that's the thing that we've got to get over. And I think most people that I've been, coming off the back of my research, are quite positive about it. And that was heartening to me. I will say that the people who put their hand up for my research, though, are those who are more open to these kind of things and do see the positive things in, what's coming with AI and virtual reality. But I do think that these are big issues, and we as an industry have to absolutely tell really positive stories about these technologies, because this has to change. We have to, together as an industry, figure out how to be safe with all these things, and then then it's going to be amazing, because we're going to be able to do these things. We're going to be able to prevent diseases. We're going to be able to just have that kind of scanning in our homes, and it won't be obtrusive. I've built a lot of apps in my time where if you have a disease, you have to track this, you have to do this brain training thing, you have to, and they don't work that well because they need to be seamless with our lives. And some of them do have things like they can track your gait as you walk, so that may give you a signal that you might have multiple sclerosis, etc. Or in your voice, you can do diagnostics now that could lead to, oh yes, early stages of Parkinson's, so you can get treatment and all that kind of thing. And that's really where we have to get to, where these things are ambient, they're in our lives without us having to go through the hassle of having to track everything. What I worked on a drug for multiple sclerosis, it just reminds me of the fact that, that we're trying to figure out how to tell a story around this app that the pharmaceutical company had. And the problem is that to solve the mysteries of that disease, we need people at scale putting in this data. And then maybe through AI, we'll be able to see patterns in this disease that is hugely mysterious now. But the problem is that if you get these people to put all their data in, and then they go to their neurologist, and the neurologist says, oh, well, that's great, you put in all this data for a year. And they say, okay, doctor, what does that mean then? Are you going to change my treatment? And they say, well, no, actually, I don't know what this means, really. This is a highly variable disease, and that's not enough. That's just not, those little signals are just that's how that disease is. And so then it's difficult for that person to continue the motivation to track all this. But I think in the future, when it is more ambient and we feel safe with that, then it's really going to be fantastic.
Definitely, the use cases and data privacy issues are definitely a constant and long-going battle,
Yeah.
not only in a regulation side, but also as a user recognition side. If people are acceptable of
Yeah.
giving
Yes.
out, with some conditions, of course,
Yeah.
anonymity, for instance, their data.
Yeah.
Um, so we were mentioning some use cases of AI in
Yeah.
detection of different disease, pattern recognition, which
Mm,
is life changing. And
yeah.
we were also mentioning some XR technology for healthcare,
Yeah.
for empathy, but also for treatment.
Yeah.
Um, there is a new emerging, has been emerging for a very long time, domain, which is a brain machine interface. So
Oh,
we
yes.
are pretty early stage, but can you maybe share some insights around this topic as well?
I cannot say that I've got very close to this, but this is very interesting, isn't it? If you think of, cyberpunk and that kind of thing about modding the physical experience of becoming kind of a half cyborg. But I don't know, Elon Musk has got an ambition there to really have us jacking in, kind of like Neuromancer style, to to tap into our brains such that we could, I mean, some of the things that are possible are allowing people to be able to see, for example, that you can create a new neural pathway that will allow them to interpret it in a different way, but allow them to then sort of see in a slightly different way, but still. And similarly with hearing. And so I think it's really interesting. I just think, again, it's like, oh my God, what does this mean for humanity if we're going to, I don't know, half of us will be the haves in this situation and they'll wind up modded, head to toe. It's really, yeah, interesting times we're entering, isn't it?
Yeah, we are quite early on this topic. I guess the current prototypes are the ones where kids or like any one of us could control a car on the left or right with
Yeah.
kind of a device that is connected with alpha system.
Yeah.
However, for a fully functional brain machine interface, we are still looking for a wait of a couple of years, if not 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
So potentially, if we are going to look into that direction, which is to the future, can you maybe tell us some of your imagined scenario of
No.
specifically the healthcare part? As of today, well, when we get a disease, we go to the hospital, go to a clinic, go to the doctor.
Hmm.
We do some prevention when we are conscious about it,
Yeah.
paying attention to nutrition, not to do bad habits. What is the future like in terms of people's consciousness about health, but also education and the healthcare
Yeah.
system in a public way and in a private way, and the link with technologies, a lot
Yeah.
of different
No, I
topics.
love this conversation. You made me think of something I haven't actually thought about before, which is about it. It just sprang into my mind the idea of biofeedback, and what traditionally what that is people learn how to control their breath, or just to change, I don't know, a psychological state. But what if, if you have nanotechnology, of course, what if you could actually enhance the healing mechanisms in the body, and be able to actually direct it in a a cognitive way? That would be incredible. So that you could, I don't know, if you hurt yourself, then you could direct the nanites or whatever to that would be pretty incredible. I'm just thinking about what how you might extend that out. It's I mean, I have never thought about that before, but that's the thing that springs to mind in a more kind of just healthcare sort of way, not so much in the kind of superhero sort of military. Let's enhance our bodies to do things that we aren't able to do, which that sounds pretty cool, as well.
Very interesting. So, you are in contact with a lot of different bigger companies, also public institutions, I guess, but
Mm,
potentially also some startups. Could
yeah,
you give us some maybe examples of what are the efforts that are being put in? You mentioned some different use cases, such as empathy in VR, and
yeah,
but also prevention through app and education through
yeah,
data entry and tracking. Are
yeah.
there other similar efforts or different efforts being
Yeah.
done?
I think, when the metaverse was really very current and people were very interested in it, and Sandbox, people were buying land and all that, and I think they probably still are. But the thought, some colleagues, what are they? I don't know, associates, friends of mine, that for a meetup that we go to called Augmenting Reality in the UK, one of the founders of that is a very well-known surgeon, and he has been he got the role of the metaverse officer for a startup that was really interesting. And this was the vision of this was the future of care in a metaverse like world. And so instead of buying land, you might have a space in the hospital. And so they were very interested in creating a new economy around healthcare, so that where we have creators that may create, fashion stuff that we could wear in that world, it would be providers of healthcare services. And then, of course, the idea would be that our personal data would also be something that we would have control over in this new healthcare economy. And so I think if that gets off the ground, that will be really interesting, because, there's huge barriers in healthcare where you might not live in the center of the city where that you have access to the best doctors, for example. There's certainly the centers for oncology or whatever would tend to be more clustered there than further out. But if you could use the new technology, XR technology, then you could still visit these healthcare specialists in that metaverse type world. And of course, the near adjunct to that is the fact that some of these healthcare treatments can be provided that way through the use of robotics. And I think Dr. Shafi Ahmed is the man who's the co-founder of that group and who's very active in this space. I think he's done a lot in the robotic space, or has done a lot to promote it. And so you start to see a very interesting space there, where if it's a healthcare economy, then it opens the door to all kinds of startups. And I think it's some years out, especially because interest in the metaverse is I think it's just a sense of needing to lay some proper foundations before we can make that leap. There's a lot of questions, but I do think that's where we'll get to. And I think that will be really interesting and really helpful.
Definitely. So technology or platforms are there for the connectivity, for education, for democratization of access to those social connections, knowledge, and proper healthcare as well. So looking forward to the next years of development in terms of technology as well. So happy to have you here today, Andrew, and then don't hesitate maybe to share the links to your research and your presentation to us, so that we can make everybody more healthy as of what we can do today.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's been great.
Thank you, Andrew.